move on to the story now. And Business Leadership South Africa is calling for an end to sexual harassment in the workplace. It's asking the business community to take a stand. The organization has also reaffirmed its commitment to support the 16 days of activism for no violence against women and children. I'm now joined in studio by Business Leadership South Africa CEO Busisiwe Mavuso. Thank you so much for coming through. So, when you're calling for the business community to take a stand, beyond the prescripts of the law and the various policies and many, workplace policies against sexual harassment, what are you calling for specifically this time around?
So I think we're definitely calling for that, Tulasizo. We're calling for more clarity, I think, in as far as the policies are concerned, because you'll find that sexual harassment might be a paragraph somewhere in the HR policy, but we're saying that's not enough. Where women in particular are under this scourge, in the country, I'm sure business is going to have to be stepping up and doing more, So can there be clearer policies? Can there be clearer reporting lines? Can there be hotlines that have been put in? And also, it becomes difficult because you find that the perpetrators of these things are your line manager. So if it's your line manager, how do you therefore, take it up with the guarantee that there's not going to be any consequences for your career, as it were. So we're thinking that if business can actually amplify their seriousness around sexual harassment, then it actually probably discourages those that are actually perpetrating it within the workplace to actually, not continue to do so, But if we continue, having it as a paragraph in our HR policy, which is 300 pages long, then it actually doesn't help. So I think there's going to have to be more intentionalism, from business and as far as this is
so concerned. I take it that this call, Busisiwe, is based on your diagnosis that as things stand, we may have all these noble intentions, but they are buried somewhere within the HR policy that someone has to go and look up. It's not lifted and brought to the front and the fore to say, actually, among many other values, at the core of our values is this matter against sexual harassment, and that in addition, the structures that are needed for reporting lines, for example, the hotlines you're talking about, are not in place?
Not with all the companies, definitely not. And I think, for me, this is a function of context. Great leadership and great businesses would want to respond to what is happening within the environment. I don't think that we can continue as a business community, operating as if what's happening around the society or around us doesn't actually affect us. So if we agree that we are the microcosm of a society and we're seeing this uprise, in sexual violence and escalation in sexual violence, you probably maybe want to foolproof yourself and say, what is it that I do within my organization if I actually am aware that these people who are my employees are from the very same society? So how do I therefore ensure that within the businesses then I'm actually foolproof? I mean, if you look at the Uyinene case, for instance, that was someone's employee. The guy was an employee in the South African, post office. It therefore says, whether we like it or not, we've actually been brought, this thing has been brought, at our feet as business, and we're actually going to have to respond decisively. And it is for this reason that we're actually elevating it in totality as an ethics issue. So you know that probably a week or so back we launched an ethics barometer, and I think elevating, such things, is part of why we have actually launched
I like the fact that you're taking it in that direction. I know you to be, as an organization, to be big on holding each other accountable with the results, that you have mechanisms, for example, to suspend the membership of certain organizations if they are found in the wrong, particularly around issues of corruption and governance.
Absolutely.
Why have you not done the same with enforcing the issues around sexual harassment in the workplace? Make it a condition like the condition you have around good governance.
So I wouldn't say that we haven't done the same, Tulasizo, and I think I've just illustrated right now that sometimes these things are a function of context, and being a responsible citizen and being a responsible business says that how do you therefore respond, in terms of where you find yourselves as a business, within the community that you're operating. So Business Leadership South Africa is actually stepping up to say that in realizing what is happening in the community, then we are actually taking the issue of sexual harassment to be tantamount and to be equivalent to the issue of ethics. ethics? And how are we as businesses going to actually respond? And we're actually taking it further. We're saying that, disparities that sometimes exist within organizations, such as, not paying people equally for the work of equal value, can actually be seen. And you find that it's normally women who are not paid the same as men, and yet there's work of equal value. Are we not, therefore, by such practices, already condoning, the issue of sexual harassment and actually escalating?
I am out of time, but I do need you to give me a sense on this.
Yeah.
Will this approach of voluntary stepping up in the fight against sexual harassment and the unfair treatment of women in the workplace, the voluntary approach versus enforcement? We've been calling for this voluntary approach. Step up. Take leadership as business. Don't tolerate these practices. It doesn't seem to be really gaining the traction and momentum. Is it time for enforcement?
We're talking to a few gender-based violence groupings at the moment, and I know there are talks around ensuring that we actually enforce these. And the reason why Business Leadership South Africa is the only business association has a seat around the table is precisely because we want to support whatever initiatives that come from there. And if it means enforcement, then Business Leadership South Africa is for it.
All right. Thank you so much for coming through. Busisiwe Mavuso, who is the CEO of Business Leadership South Africa, talking to me about the situation around sexual harassment and inequality in as far as it affects women in the workplace.